Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of the Triple F podcast, Faith and Family First. And we're going to be talking about the elections right here in the state of Hawaii. So let's chat about that. Aloha, everybody, and we're so glad you could join us today. I know that if you're like me, you're kind of taking in what happened with the elections yesterday, and you're probably thinking, how do I make sense of this? And as of this recording, we don't even have a final printout for the Hawaii elections. So when you're listening to this on the radio, some of the things we're talking about may have changed. So please don't send me any nasty emails that we were wrong. So as the discussion that we're taking place today is going to be based on the third printout that we were able to get from the Office of Elections. But we have a special guest today. We have attorney Fritz Rohlfing, who has been on our show before. Some of you may recognize him, but for those of you that don't, welcome to the show today,
It's
Fritz.
great to be with you again, Eva.
Yeah, it's always good. Fritz, he's going to give you a little background about himself, but we like to do these election roundups with Fritz. And of course, as always, I have my dog and pony show cohort, partner, friend, colleague, Jim Hochberg. Welcome, Jim.
Hi.
Jim, go ahead. Put your glasses on.
I only need him to read.
I thought, okay, so Fritz and I were teasing Jim about his red, bright glasses he was
my
wearing
sunglasses.
because he was waiting for that wave, that tidal wave, Fritz, that never came in. So let's start with you, Fritz. What is your overall feelings about the election this year?
After you tell us about yourself.
That's true. That's true.
Good
Thank
idea.
you, Jim.
Yeah, I'm born and raised here in Hawaii, and went to college on the mainland, but came back. I've been practicing law for almost as long as Jim Hochberg has. And,
I think we're both 1984, aren't we?
Oh, you're actually 1 year behind me.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have the people working the cameras like 1980s. We weren't even born yet. No, I don't know. Maybe they were.
So, like Jim, I'm a lawyer, and I've been involved in Hawaii politics probably since I was about 3 years old, and my dad was running in the first statehood election in 1959 for office. I've served in various capacities with the Republican Party of Hawaii, including party chairman. But I'm not a party official now, but I am an interested observer, and so it's great to be with you.
We like to have Fritz because he is definitely a numbers guy, just like me. Fritz and I like to stay up on election night and kind of like peruse the numbers. But I know one of the things I'd like to get your thoughts on, Fritz, is that across the nation, a lot of the pundits were saying there was going to be this tsunami, that the Republicans were just going to take the world, and it didn't happen the way that people thought. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, that was hyperbole. That was overstated. And one of the problems is there has been some trouble or problems with the validity or the accuracy of pre-election polling. And that happened in the 2016 election, and even 2020 with regard to presidential race. Republican candidate Donald Trump generally did better in his election results than the polls showed. So I think too many Republicans got the idea that the polling was probably wrong, probably really wrong. But this time the polling was pretty close. And I never bought into that, actually. I did see that there were times when polling would underestimate Republican success or election day results. But you have to have some gauge, and polling, and what we were doing, what was being done with the polling was averaging the polling as they went on. And that actually it actually turned out to be pretty good. That when you average all these polls, because you're always, you have certain sample sizes and statistical issues and some biases from one side or the other. But it turned out that the polls were really correct, and the polls were showing that it was going to be close in a lot of cases, and that especially the U.S. Senate, but even the House races were going to be close, and they were. And in certain places, Republicans did very well, like in Florida and in Ohio, they did very well. But they even did well, even though their gubernatorial candidate in New York State did not win. He lost by 4 or 5 percentage points, and they're still counting votes. But he was able to lead the party in New York State so that those running in congressional races as Republicans did better than they usually do. And they were also fortunate that they were able to get a district map in New York State that replaced what the Democrat-controlled legislature had put together. And so they were in, reasonably, fair election districts, and they did very well. So it's, but in some places not so well, like in Minnesota. So it was kind of and some people are calling it a purple muddle, of blue and purple, but or blue and red making purple. But overall, Republicans did well, but they didn't do really well, and in some cases it was a disappointment. And so both houses hang in the balance, both houses of Congress. It looks like the Republicans are going to end up controlling the U.S. House of Representatives and be in the majority, although it'll be a more narrow majority than people were hoping for. People tend to believe in outside factors like president's popularity and how people were suffering economically from inflation, and so they tended to work that into, well, the polls show that the Republican candidates are doing better, conservative candidates are getting closer, so let's just extrapolate from that and say by election day they're going to overshoot, and that was excessively optimistic.
And the other thing they do too, though, when the talking heads have the poll that they're talking about on the screen, and they're saying X candidate has a 2-point lead, what they don't say, but what you can read if you look, the margin of error is 3.7. Right. So they don't necessarily really have a lead.
Right. And you don't know. That's why if it's within the margin of error, you can't even really venture a prediction of who's going to win.
But they do.
Well,
I mean, on TV, they do. That's what they get paid for.
Pundits have to say something. Nobody would watch what they have to say, And then there's always the problem in every human endeavor, and politics is one of them, of just self-reinforcing bias, where because you want something to happen, you tend to pick those facts that tend to support your perspective and your hope for outcome, and you have to just factor that in and always realize, I need to look at the cold hard facts and the data rather than just what I'm hoping will be the case.
What I'd like to do is get both of your opinions on something, because obviously, taking into consideration what both of you just said, that right now what's happening is you've got people that are now pointing fingers at whose fault it is, right? Why did this happen? And then you really see people digging their heels into the ground, and they're holding on. They're not going to let anything go by them, right? So instead of unifying the party, I'd say one of the things about the Democratic Party is after the primary, they unite, right? Sure. Even if they hate each other or they disagree with policy, they unite. But it seems like on the Republican side, rather than looking at this and saying, okay, how do we go forward in a positive way? How do we begin to make change? Now they're saying it's your fault, it's Trump's fault, it's not Trump's fault, and people are digging in. So I'd like both of you to give your thoughts on that. So we'll start with you, Jim.
Okay, I, for a very long time, realized that the people that affiliate with policies that the Democratic Party tends to support, this collectivism thing, they're willing to sacrifice their own independence for the group. And the Republicans are kind of opposite. We're these independent thinking people who don't feel a need to fall on a sword for everybody else. And that's kind of the way it appears to me to roll out.
Okay, Fritz?
Yeah, there's some truth to what Jim is saying, is that there's less of a willingness to compromise and more of a tendency to just say, well, I'm out of here.
and so if you were going to put it in terms of religious faith, but I'm not. The Democrats are more like Catholics with a pope, and the Republicans are more like the 17,000 Protestant denominations.
Jeez. Okay, all hate mail can be addressed to Jim at jameshochberglaw.com. All right, but that's a good point because, taking what's happening across the nation, a lot of times Hawaii is overlooked, right, in these national, although Tulsi Gabbard's name always comes up, right? Every time I participate in any national meeting, they're like, how's Tulsi? And I'm like, well, I don't, it's not like, we catch the bus together and, see each other all the time. I do remember Tulsi and know her from her days, Fritz and Jim, back when she was in our state House of Representatives here.
Or her dad's kid.
Yes, or her dad's kid.
And the city council.
And our city council. But, people tend not to look at Hawaii. But we actually had some interesting things happen here in Hawaii's election. I think the first thing is, again, we don't have the final count because we don't have the final printout. But the turnout was not quite as much as we would like to have seen. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that. It seems like we're about the 50%. Maybe it'll go up a little bit,
right,
but around the 50% of voter turnout for the general election. Now, I know, Fritz, you do numbers. I know that in a presidential election year, the numbers always go up. There's always more interest. And this is not one of those years.
Right.
But so what do you think is happening with that?
Well, and that's why if you're going to look at our turnout for 2022, it's not really fair to compare it to a presidential year like 2020. And of course, that year was the first year we had universal mail balloting, right? It used to be you could request for any reason a mail ballot. Half the voters were already doing that. And then the state says, okay, we're not going to have any polling locations open anymore, other than a few scattered here and there on the island. But everybody, we're just going to mail a ballot to every single registered voter, whether they requested it or not. Okay.
And the thing that bothers me about that, I often on this show and other venues talk about how valuable our right to vote is. And with all the things the state and county government spend money on, the one they want to cut back on is exercising of our valuable right to vote.
Right.
That really bugs me. We got to elect people who will take the opposite view and return us to people that value our vote. It bothers me.
They definitely should have more. There should be a greater availability of polling sites on election day.
There was one on Maui, and there was a huge fire over there. I mean, how much worse can it be?
Yeah. And we do have to address that the news showed that the lines on voting day were absolutely outraged. Like, they were super long. I mean, there were some kupuna waiting an hour and a half, 2 hours in line. That's unacceptable.
And that's discouraging voting.
It really is.
And the comeback to that as well, we mailed them a ballot. Why won't they mail it? Well, for whatever reason, they are not either comfortable with that, or they prefer the idea of I wait to election day so I can hear everything everybody says, and then I'm going to go out and vote. On the other hand, if you're supporting a candidate, since the way things are set up, ballots are mailed out 3 weeks before the election, it's probably best to get your supporters to just fill those ballots out and mail them in, so at least, if something comes up on election day, like a fire on the next to the highway, that won't be blocking at least most of your voters from voting. So we have to go with the system that we have. But the reason I mention it is just because we started a new thing in 2020, and we did it again this time around with its various glitches and problems and issues and problems. But if we go back to 2018, where half the people sent in mail-in ballots that they had requested, and the other half went to their polling locations, I totaled up, just by adding up, and I hope my calculator was right, about 400,000 votes or voters voted in Hawaii in 2018. That was a midterm election, not a presidential year, general election. And what I'm getting now with this printout, and like you said, there might be some more to come, but probably not a lot.
Yeah.
But I have just barely over 350,000. So
it's not working.
Well,
the goal isn't being met.
For whatever reason, it may have to do maybe with the mail-out ballots, it may have to do with something else. There was a big drop in voter turnout this midterm election in Hawaii as opposed to 4 years ago midterm election in Hawaii, and we could probably speculate as to reasons. But
well, part of it's the candidates. Each one of the candidates didn't get out the vote.
Yep. Yep.
Half of the eligible voters didn't vote again.
It definitely has to do something with the candidates.
I'm going to get to the bottom of it. You both know that this has been like big. I mean, I'm speaking to people out there, watchers, viewers, listeners, sleepers.
Is this your send money plea?
No, it could be.
For the survey?
I want to do a survey to find
Send
out
money.
why
Send
people in
money.
Hawaii, and to do it well, you all know that it's going to take kala, a lot of kala.
Tens of thousands.
Because
actually.
I don't want it to be one of those, well, this is kind of what, I want it to be like, it can't be refuted. I want a local company, and I've already reached out to one of them that's willing to do it.
With a great reputation.
We need to find out, because it could be, we could sit here for an hour and talk about, well, it could be this and it could be that. We don't know why people in Hawaii just don't jump up and vote. I do know that one thing I hear from no matter what side of the aisle people come from, people here do not like negative campaigning. That really turns people off on both sides. Now, when does something become negative, right? I mean, if you're just saying this is how this person votes or this is how they answered the survey, that's not negative. This is how it is. And I think that at some point we'll need to talk about that.
But I think you're on to something, too, is that from what I've understood, and I think I've shared it with you, that research elsewhere on the mainland shows that a lot of religious people don't vote because they just don't like politics and how people behave, negative ads, and so they feel that if they refrain from participating, that will probably be for their good, and they'll be better off for it. Unfortunately, that's not true.
But you know what's really weird? My wife and I go to two different churches. Saturday night is one, Sunday is the other. At both of those churches since before the primary, both of those churches have been pushing go vote, make sure you vote, make sure you vote. So it's kind of odd that would be, although, as you often say, people don't like to vote when their choice is the devil or the Antichrist.
That's right, and that's how people feel. And I know, because you all know, because of our voter guide, we get a lot of feedback on that. And a lot of people are just, especially if candidates don't answer the survey,
oh, sure.
right? Then people, especially if they don't know them. And Fritz, you and I were talking before we started recording that every vote counts, and it really, really does. Now, before I get into that, because
We
that's
actually should
important.
start talking
We
about
should.
some of the
We
races.
should. But-
We're running out of time.
And let's do this. Okay, so before going into this election, Hawaii's legislative makeup has 25 members in the Senate. One was a Republican. In the House, 51 House members, and there were 4 Republicans.
Well, before the election cycle.
You're interrupting me again.
Too many of them split.
Yes,
from the
because
House.
there was a redistricting, and because of the redistricting, there was some shuffling around. So now going to this election, there is a chance that the Republicans could pick up a couple of seats. And so let's get into those numbers. Yeah. So let's talk first about the Senate, because there is a surprising...
So we're just going to bypass the governor's race?
well, that's because everybody.
I think we know what the result is. Everybody knows that. That was a headline in the newspaper, right?
Let's look in the camera and say, really feel bad for you, Duke.
No, you know what? I sent a message to Duke, and I did send a message to Josh Green as well, because I do have a relationship with both of them. But I did send a message to Duke. I was very proud of him. He stepped up when nobody else seemed to want to do it. Duke puts himself out there. He gave a very great concession speech. I think, but can we not ignore the fact that twice now in 2 elections, 2 individuals who were Native Hawaiian were bypassed by the people of Hawaii to vote for people that were not Native Hawaiian? Because if you remember, it was Duke and Elwyn. Yeah. And then now, and this time it was Duke and Tapai, right?
Well, if you also take Andrea Tupola.
Oh yes, and Andrea Tupola. So,
but now she has Native Hawaiian ancestry.
And you pass. And okay, I don't want anybody to say that I'm hating on people that are. But we're in Hawaii. You would think that the Native Hawaiians would like to have a Native Hawaiian as their governor. But anyway, I did give a shout out to Duke for putting his name out there. And of course, as always, we encourage everybody to build relationship with Governor Green and to reach out to him and stay connected in a positive way, because that's how we make change.
You're right.
So,
right.
You're right.
But I do want to say, at least with regard to what you said about Duke, that it was fortunate that he did come forward, because what we're going to talk about now probably would not be happening in the state house and the state senate if he had not run and somebody of his stature and ability had not been running. But I also agree with you also that we have a new governor, and it's Josh Green, and we should work with him as best we can to improve our state.
That's right.
And to protect our families.
Well, what's kind of cool is the closing ads that Josh Green used stole Duke Iona's messaging, if you notice that. Duke started out talking about more affordable housing and ways to do it and all that kind of stuff. That was Josh Green's closing ad.
Well, I listened to Josh Green's acceptance speech, or after it was, and he did a good job too of saying, okay, we have to work together now, and so we got to give him props that, and I know there are people listening going, oh, come on, these guys, they practice in the mirror, right? They want to sound good, but we got to move forward. We have to move forward.
But working together in Hawaii between the governor and the legislature, it's the same team anyway. That's not hard to work together.
Well, that's why as we get into these last few minutes, it's not like we have 62 races to discuss. We really only have just a handful. So on the Senate, we have Senator Favela, obviously, is a Republican. He's going to continue. And
he ran
now
unopposed.
We potentially have another Republican senator.
Right, and that's in State Senate District 23, and that is Brenton Ava, who, as of right now, as we're speaking with this third printout, and who knows when the next one is coming, he has 7,477 votes, just barely ahead of State Senator Gil Revere, the incumbent, who has 7,332 votes. So they're separated by 1%.
And there's actually more blank votes in that race than the separation.
There's one. So the difference.
So
between
there were 447 people that voted for nobody in that race.
Right.
Who, if one of those two candidates had gotten half of them,
well, I was going to say, if we look at the numbers, right, there's only 145 vote difference between Ava and Rivera, but then the 447 blank votes, every vote counts, people. We say that all the time. This is proof that is one of them. So that's kind of a race we're watching.
That's another thing to do in your survey. Why do you leave parts of the ballot blank, even if you voted for the governor? Why will you not vote in a state Senate election?
Because that's the candidate where it was Satan and the Antichrist.
Yes. Now,
Not in this case.
Well, no, I mean, whenever. Yeah. I've left ballots blank.
These are
on
actually
certain...
two good candidates on both sides.
What I'm just saying is I have left my ballot blank on certain races because I didn't want either of them.
Okay.
Right.
And that's I hope that is the reason.
Yeah.
That's really the only acceptable reason.
Right. Okay, so now.
Unless, like, I got OCD'd or something and I skipped it. But I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Now moving over to the House. Okay, so on the House side is very interesting because we, again, before the redistricting, there were 4 Republicans, but now it looks like we could potentially have 6 because Gene Ward is already there in office, right? Now, in moving to District 38, Representative Lauren Matsumoto, they've already called her a winner on that one. So, and that's my district. Hi, Lauren. And then House District 39, we've got a very close race. Well, not really that close. There's Perrick and Rosenlee. Perrick is the Republican, and they haven't called it yet.
If we were on Fox, we
would have called it. Yeah, and they may have called it, like I said, by the time you're listening to this. So that's that one. And then District 41, David Alcos actually has toppled Matt Lopresti. Now, what's interesting is for those of you following all the news over the election, both of them have had trouble with the law. Both of them have had issues. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this turns out. That is another one they haven't called as of this recording, but that's a potential Republican pickup. And then in District 42, Diamond Garcia has taken the lead over incumbent Sharon Har, but this is another case of only a 300 vote difference between the two and 389 blank votes. So it's another case where every vote makes a difference. And this one has definitely not been called yet because
it's so close.
It's only 91% have been counted, and she could pick up very easily those 300 votes. So that one hasn't been called yet. And then, of course, District 43, Kanani Souza, who's an attorney here in the state of Hawaii, has looks like she's beaten out Stacey Lynn Eli, who is the incumbent, the Democrat incumbent. So that's interesting.
It does look, though, there were 2 Republican districts that were vacated by the incumbents, essentially vacated for the election. And that is State Representative Bob McDermott's district, which I think is District 40.
And that went Democrat.
And that, it looks like it's very close, and I don't think you could actually call it yet either. But it looks like Rose Martinez, the Democratic nominee, is ahead by over 200 votes over, is it Janie Guiso? It's a Republican candidate. Guiso.
I don't know.
All right. Thank you.
I'm going to get an email going. That was totally not how you say it.
And then the other seat, and I'm not sure which number it was, but State Representative Val Okimoto decided not to run for re-election. In fact, she was the minority leader,
Right.
the Republican leader.
She was my representative. She's moving over now to city council. Looks like at this point she's winning.
Yes, she's well ahead and on her way to becoming Councilwoman Okimoto. So and that is part of my case where we actually did get, if not large North Shore surf in terms of a wave here, we got at least maybe a small South Shore bump for the Republicans, which was a good thing. And I thought it could happen. And I do want to congratulate Republican Party Chair Lynn Finnegan, because she put this team of candidates together with the help of all of the people in the party to recruit these candidates to run. And she had a large number of contested races where in the past we've seen a lot have been conceded. There were a few that were conceded, but there were many that were contested, and it's fortunate because these are the districts where they had the best shot, and it's still amazing to me whenever they do come across the finish line. At least they're leading for now.
Well, what I'd like to do is we need to end, but I know Jim is chomping.
I've got something. I got something.
All right, well, make it super, super quick.
Okay, so looking at the non-Republican wins, it's like 60% to 70% Democrats to 40, 30, 20s of the Republicans. So what we need to do in Hawaii now, starting now, talk to your friends, neighbors, relatives, people in your circle of influence, not about parties, but about the issues. Crime, expensive gas, expensive food, difficulty hiring good employees, just whatever the issues are, because people seem to be voting 60-30 in favor of Democrats when the Democrats are kind of responsible for what we got to live through here. We need to talk about those issues so that in 2 years, it might not turn out 60-40, 70-30.
Yep, and in Hawaii, we always have a saying that you never turn your back on the ocean. So we are encouraging people not to turn their back on the elections. Action is not ending with this election, so stay tuned. Next week, we're going to be talking about the charter amendments and what happened with them, so stay tuned for that. Like, subscribe, share, and we will see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Mahalo.
Aloha.